The desert of Regos 9 was endless, wind blew hot and dry. Sand dunes stretched to the horizon like frozen waves. The sun above burned without mercy, and nothing moved except a single hover transport roaring across the sand. Dust flew behind it. In thick clouds, metal treads hummed as the hover bounced over rocks and dips. It was fast and loud. But that wasn't what made the scene strange. What made it cruel was what dragged behind the vehicle. Chained to the back was a tall alien creature. Its skin was dark silver, rough and cracked like old stone. Glowing blue veins pulsed across its arms and neck. It had no armor, no weapons, and no strength left in its legs. Its body bounced and rolled across the hot sand, leaving a broken trail. Blood marked the ground where it passed, inside the hover. For rough-looking men laughed. They wore sun cloaks and goggles, their skin tanned and burned from too many days outside. One of them, the driver, drank from a metal flask and said, "Bet we get double pay for this thing. No way the warlord's seen a beast like this before." Another man leaned out the window, squinting at the alien. "It's still breathing. That's good. They want it alive." The third man, tall and bald, slapped the roof. "Alive's fine. Just not walking. We drag it to the trade station. Show we tamed it." They all laughed again. None of them looked behind, at the figure slowly walking across the desert foreign. The distance, that figure was a man named Tom. He moved carefully, step by step, carrying a small pack and a long stick to help him walk over soft sand. His clothes were simple gray cloth, faded boots, and a scarf around his neck. A small scanner blinked on his wrist, showing the heat level and distance of the hover. He had been following them for 3 hours. Tom didn't come here to start trouble. He was just moving between towns, hoping to find food, maybe work. But when he saw the drag marks in the sand and the blood, he stopped. When he followed and saw the creature behind the hover, he didn't look away. He remembered what it felt like to be left behind. He didn't know what kind of alien it was. He'd seen many in his travels, some with scales, some with wings, some made of gas. But this one looked solid, strong, even in pain. Its arms were long, hands large and clawed. Its head had no mouth, only glowing eyes, now dull from exhaustion. It was not fighting. It was just trying to survive. Tom kept walking. He didn't rush. He knew the desert well. The hover was fast, but it stopped often. Those men would rest soon. They drink and eat. They get careless. The sun moved across the sky slowly, casting sharp shadows. Round noon, Tom reached the top of a hill and lay down on his stomach. He pulled out old binoculars, scratched and rusted, but still useful. Down below, he saw the hover had stopped. The 4 men were sitting around a small heat shield, eating dry meat and laughing. The alien lay still, half buried in the sand, chain tight around its ankle. Tom watched quietly. One man kicked the alien's leg and said, "Still alive. That's tough skin." The others laughed again. Tom didn't smile. He watched the alien's head move slightly. Its eye opened a little, glowing faint blue, and looked toward the ridge where Tom lay. Their eyes met, even from far away. Tom felt something strange in his chest. Not fear, not anger. A connection. Like the creature saw something in him, something familiar. He looked away, then packed up his gear. He turned off the scanner on his wrist. No more tracking needed. He knew where they were. The sun was still high. He would wait until it dropped lower. Then he would move. He found a small rock formation to hide behind and rested. He ate a protein bar and drank half a bottle of water. He cleaned his old rifle, checked the power cell, still charged. He also had a knife, sharp and strong. He closed his eyes for a few minutes. He dreamed of another desert on Earth long ago. Soldiers marching, smoke in the sky, friends falling beside him. He woke up quickly and breathed slowly. That was a different time. He was not a soldier anymore. But maybe for one more day, he could be. Evening came. Shadows grew longer. The heat faded just a little. Tom stood up, brushed sand off his clothes, and looked down at the camp. The men were still talking, now louder. One of them danced near the fire, showing off. Another was checking a map. No one was watching the alien. Tom picked up his rifle, slung it over his back, and began moving down the ridge. He didn't know if he could save the alien. He didn't know what the mercenaries would do when they saw him. But he knew one thing for sure. He was not going to walk away. Not this time. Night came slowly on Regos 9. The sky turned from pale gold to deep purple. Stars appeared, sharp and bright in the dry air. The wind blew cooler now, but the desert was still not safe. Small creatures moved under the sand, and sometimes large ones too. But Tom stayed low behind the rocks, silent, focused on the camp below. The 4 mercenaries had made a fire using power cells and dry fuel. Orange light flickered on their faces. Their hover sat beside them, still humming quietly. The alien lay near the back of the vehicle, half covered in sand. It had not moved in hours. Tom raised his binoculars. The alien's chest moved slowly. It was alive, barely. The men were laughing again. One of them held a bottle. The bald one, he looked like the leader, pointed at the alien and said, "We show up with this thing at the station, and the warlord gives us triple pay." "Only if it's alive," said another. "Alive enough," the bald man replied. "He just wants to see it bleed and breathe. He's planning to use it in the arena. Make it fight some monster for sport." The youngest merc, thin with a nervous face, asked, "What is it anyway? Doesn't look like any kind I've seen." The bald one shrugged. "Doesn't matter. It's not human. It's not from the trading ports either. Probably deep sector. Maybe even one of those ancient ones." The other man poked at the fire and laughed. "Well, it's tough, I'll give it that. Most things would have died being dragged like that." Tom lowered the binoculars. He looked at the alien again. Its head was turned slightly. One eye was still open, not glowing as bright as before, but not dark either. Tom studied its shape. Long arms, strong chest, muscles built for power. Not a weak creature. But now, its strength was gone. Tom whispered to himself, "You held on." He reached into his pack and pulled out a small thermal blanket. He would need it later if the cold grew stronger. But for now, he focused on the plan forming in his mind. He couldn't attack in the open. They had better weapons. He didn't know if the alien could even move. So he waited. The marks passed the bottle. Soon, one fell asleep by the fire. Another leaned against the hover and closed his eyes. The leader stayed awake a bit longer, cleaning his gun, but even he grew slower as the night went on. Tom took a deep breath and moved. He slid between rocks, careful not to make noise. He moved like a shadow, slow and steady. He kept his hands low, body close to the ground. He knew the desert well. He knew where the sand shifted and where the rocks stayed firm. He reached the back of the hover and crouched low. The alien lay right there, eyes closed now. Breathing weak. Tom took out a small bottle of water. He removed the cap and poured a little on a cloth. Gently, he wiped dust from the alien's face. He poured a few drops on its lips. They cracked, but the alien swallowed. Its eyes opened again. Tom whispered, "I'm not one of them." The alien blinked slowly. Tom looked at the chain. It was thick, made of smart metal. Not easy to break without a tool. But maybe there was another way. For now, the alien needed rest. "Water." Care. Tom reached into his bag and pulled out a patch. Kit. He used a small vial of sealant and pressed it against one of the alien's wounds. It hissed softly. The alien flinched but stayed still. Behind them, one of the marks snored loudly. Tom whispered again, "I'll be back." He moved away just as slowly, back to the rocks, from his spot. He watched the camp again. The fire burned lower. All 4 mercenaries were now asleep. The night grew colder. The stars above blinked quietly. Tom stayed awake. His body was tired, but his mind stayed sharp. He thought about his past fights on other planets, friends he had lost, missions where he was ordered to look away, ordered not to help, ordered to move on. He had followed those orders. Not anymore. The alien's face stayed in his mind, even half dead. It had not begged. It had not cried. It had only watched him. With strength. Tom pulled the blanket over his legs and leaned back against the rock. He needed a few hours of rest. Then he would strike. Before he closed his eyes, he looked once more at the alien. Its eye was still open, looking toward him. In the quiet desert night, no words were needed. They both understood. The first light of morning crept over the edge of the dunes. The wind had changed, now moving slower, softer, but carrying the same dry heat. The stars faded, and the sky turned gray-blue. It was time. Tom woke before the sun rose fully. His blanket was covered with a thin layer of sand. He dusted himself off and checked the camp again. The fire had died. Two of the mercenaries were still snoring. One was eating from a small metal can. The leader, the bald one, was awake, standing near the hover. Tom watched carefully. The bald man walked over to the alien and kicked its side. "Wake up, beast. We've got a long ride ahead." The alien's body twitched, but it did not respond. The younger mercenary stepped closer. "Is it even alive? It's breathing." "That's enough," the bald man said. "Tie the chain. Tighter. We don't want it snapping loose during the run." Tom clenched his jaw. He stayed hidden, but his eyes followed every move. They didn't know he was there. He watched as they poured some water into their mouths, barely washing their faces. They were in a hurry now. Maybe they were worried someone would see what they were doing. Maybe they knew how dangerous this desert could be. Tom knew it too. He opened his pack and checked his supplies. A small knife, a few rounds for his rifle, a homemade dart shooter with 3 tranquilizer darts. Not much, but enough if used right. He placed one dart into the shooter and locked it in. Then he took a small mirror and angled it between the rocks. From there, he could see the hover clearly. The mercenaries were lifting the alien again. It groaned weakly, and its arms dragged behind. They tied the chain tighter to the back of the hover. Tom's heart beat faster. Then the engine started. The hover began to rise slightly, the sand below it pushed down by strong air pressure. It started to move. The alien's body slid across the ground once more. Tom aimed his shooter. The bald man was sitting in the back of the hover, holding a blaster. He looked around for a moment. Tom fired. The dart hit the man in the neck. The leader reached up to grab it but fell forward, unconscious in seconds. The hover stopped suddenly. One of the mercenaries shouted, "What happened?" Tom quickly ducked behind the rock. He moved fast to another position and peeked through a crack. The others were confused. They ran to the back of the hover and saw the leader lying still. "He's not breathing." Tom aimed again and fired a second dart. This one struck the man holding the map. He fell to his knees, then collapsed. The younger mercenary panicked. "We're being hunted." Tom moved again, staying low. He was not a soldier anymore, but his training never left him. The desert was quiet now, except for the wind and the confused shouting. One merc stood at the front of the hover, gun raised. The younger one grabbed a torch and turned in circles, trying to find the attacker. Tom waited. The moment the young man stepped forward, Tom threw a small rock in the opposite direction. It bounced across the sand. The young man turned quickly and fired. His laser shot hit nothing. Tom stepped out from behind the rock, aimed, and fired his last dart. It hit the young man in the leg. He screamed and dropped his weapon. The last merc turned around and saw Tom walking across the sand. Slow and steady, rifle over one shoulder. "You," the merc growled. Tom didn't stop. The man raised his weapon, but before he could shoot, Tom kicked sand into his face. The merc turned his head, coughing, and Tom struck him with the end of his rifle. The man fell to the ground. Silence returned to the desert. Tom walked to the alien. The chain was still tight. He knelt beside it and checked the creature's breathing. Shallow, but steady. He opened his water bottle again and gave the alien another drink. "I'm here," Tom said quietly. The alien opened its eyes slowly. It looked at Tom, not in fear, but in calm. Tom stood up and looked at the hover. It was still running. He stepped inside and checked the controls. He had driven older models before. This one was not much different. He moved it forward slowly, careful not to drag the alien. Then he shut it down. Dust settled around the vehicle. The 4 marks were still unconscious. Tom tied their hands and took their weapons. He kept the blaster with the most charge and hid the rest in the sand. He walked back to the alien and examined the chain. It was locked with a code. Tom searched the leader's belt and found a small device. He pressed a few buttons, and the chain clicked open. The alien's leg was badly injured, but it was free now. Tom took out bandages and wrapped the leg carefully. The alien didn't flinch. It just watched him. "You're free," Tom said. The alien didn't speak, but it lifted one hand and touched Tom's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like something more. "Thank you." Tom looked around. The desert. He could not stay here. The Marks would wake up soon. They might call for help. He had to move, and he had to take the alien with him. He grabbed a tarp from the hover and laid it on the sand. He rolled the alien gently onto it, then began pulling. The sun was rising fast. The desert had seen cruelty. Now it would see something else. The desert sun climbed higher. Heat poured down like fire from the sky. Sand shimmered, and distant hills looked like melting glass. Tom pulled the tarp slowly, step by step. The alien lay on top, weak and silent, but alive. Each step was heavy. The hover stood behind them, still and empty. The mercenaries were tied under the shade of rocks. Tom had taken their weapons and water, but he didn't know how long they would stay down. He didn't plan to wait. The alien's eyes opened sometimes. It made no sound, but its gaze followed Tom's hands, his steps, the sky above. There was trust in its silence. Tom felt it. He walked until he found shelter behind a tall rock wall. The wind was calmer there. He rolled the alien into the shade and poured a little water onto its lips again. Then he knelt beside it and opened a small case. Inside were herbs and pain patches he had picked up from a healer weeks ago. He pressed a patch to the alien's chest. It hissed softly. The alien's hand twitched. "You'll be all right," Tom said. He didn't know if the alien understood his words, but it seemed to understand his voice. Tom sat back and looked around. There was no help in sight, no radio signal, no trading outpost, just sand and sky. Still, he wasn't worried. He had faced worse odds before. Time passed. The alien rested. Tom used a rock to sharpen his knife and cleaned his rifle. He kept one eye on the distance, watching for movement. Birds circled above. Once, but left, nothing else came. Then, in the late afternoon, a soft noise reached Tom's ears. It was the hover. It was moving again. Tom stood quickly and climbed the ridge. He looked back toward the camp. The hover had started rolling slowly, kicking up sand. A trail of dust rose behind it. The mercenaries were awake. Tom tightened his grip on his rifle. He turned to the alien. Its eyes were open again. "They're coming," Tom said. He wasn't sure what the alien could do, if anything. Its body was stronger now, but the wounds were deep. It had not spoken once. Tom looked at the hover approaching in the distance. It was not fast. Maybe they were low on power, but it was coming straight for them. He had little time. Tom grabbed the blaster he had taken earlier and placed it in the alien's hand. The alien looked at the weapon, then at Tom. Its fingers closed slowly around the grip. Tom pointed toward the edge of the rocks. "You stay here. If they get close, use this." The alien blinked once. Tom climbed down and ran toward the far side of the ridge. There, he set up his rifle and lay flat on the ground. He aimed toward the approaching hover. As the vehicle came closer, he could see 3 mercenaries standing in the back. One was missing, probably still unconscious or left behind. The bald leader stood at the front, holding a scope. "He's here," he shouted. "I see him." Tom fired. The shot hit the hover side, sparking against metal. The mercenaries ducked. One fired back, but the shot flew wide. Tom rolled down the hill and moved to another rock. He fired again, hitting the engine plate. The hover slowed. The Marks shouted and jumped off the hover. 2 of them ran forward, blasters in hand. The leader stayed back, shouting orders. Tom stayed calm. He aimed carefully and fired at the ground near their feet. Sand exploded, forcing them to stop. "You can't hide forever," one of them yelled. Tom answered with silence. He circled around the rocks, using the high ground. When he reached the side of the hover, he threw a smoke bomb. Gray clouds covered the area. The mercenaries panicked in the chaos. Tom jumped onto the hover and pulled out the fuel rods. The engine shut down. Sparks flew. The machine stopped moving. The bald leader turned and fired wildly. Tom ducked and dropped behind a rock. One shot hit the stone, sending chips flying. Then Tom heard something strange, a loud, deep hum. He looked up and saw the alien dot had stood up. Its eyes were glowing again. The blue light was stronger now, shining across its chest and arms. The blaster Tom had given it was held tight. The mercenaries stared in shock. The alien raised its hand. A soft blue beam shot from the weapon. It hit the ground in front of the men, cutting a deep line in the sand. The marks dropped their guns. The bald leader raised his hand slowly. "Wait, we didn't mean harm. We were just following orders." The alien stepped forward. "Steady now, Tom." Walk to its side. "No more dragging," Tom said. "No more running." The alien turned its head toward him. Then it looked at the mercenaries. Without a word, it reached out and pressed a button on its wrist. A small signal flashed. Tom didn't know what it meant, but far above, in the sky, something moved. A light blinked among the clouds, then another. Then more ships. Small and silent. They dropped toward the desert like shadows. The mercenaries ran. One tripped and fell. The others vanished behind the rocks. The ships landed without sound. Their doors opened. Tall figures stepped out, wearing armor that shimmered like stone. One of them walked to the alien. They touched hands. Tom stood back. He didn't move. He didn't speak. The alien turned to him one last time and nodded. Then it pointed to the sky. The desert sun climbed higher. Heat poured down like fire from the sky. Sand shimmered, and distant hills looked like melting glass. Tom pulled the tarp slowly, step by step. The alien lay on top, weak and silent, but alive. Each step was heavy. The hover stood behind them, still and empty. The mercenaries were tied under the shade of rocks. Tom had taken their weapons and water, but he didn't know how long they would stay down. He didn't plan to wait. The alien's eyes opened sometimes. It made no sound, but its gaze followed Tom's hands, his steps, the sky above. There was trust in its silence. Tom felt it. He walked until he found shelter behind a tall rock wall. The wind was calmer there. He rolled the alien into the shade and poured a little water onto its lips again. Then he knelt beside it and opened a small case. Inside were herbs and pain patches he had picked up from a healer weeks ago. He pressed the patch to the alien's chest. It hissed softly. The alien's hand twitched. "You'll be all right," Tom said. He didn't know if the alien understood his words, but it seemed to understand his voice. Tom sat back and looked around. There was no help in sight, no radio signal, no trading outpost, just sand and sky. Still, he wasn't worried. He had faced worse odds before. Time passed. The alien rested. Tom used a rock to sharpen his knife and cleaned his rifle. He kept one eye on the distance, watching for movement. Birds circled above. Once, but left, nothing else came. Then, in the late afternoon, a soft noise reached Tom's ears. It was the hover. It was moving again. Tom stood quickly and climbed the ridge. He looked back toward the camp. The hover had started rolling slowly, kicking up sand. A trail of dust rose behind it. The mercenaries were awake. Tom tightened his grip on his rifle. He turned to the alien. Its eyes were open again. "They're coming," Tom said. He wasn't sure what the alien could do, if anything. Its body was stronger now, but the wounds were deep. It had not spoken once. Tom looked at the hover approaching in the distance. It was not fast. Maybe they were low on power, but it was coming straight for them. He had little time. Tom grabbed the blaster he had taken earlier and placed it in the alien's hand. The alien looked at the weapon, then at Tom. Its fingers closed slowly around the grip. Tom pointed toward the edge of the rocks. "You stay here. If they get close, use this." The alien blinked once. Tom climbed down and ran toward the far side of the ridge. There, he set up his rifle and lay flat on the ground. He aimed toward the approaching hover. As The vehicle came closer. He could see 3 mercenaries standing in the back. One was missing, probably still unconscious or left behind. The bald leader stood at the front, holding a scope. "He's here," he shouted. "I see him." Tom fired. The shot hit the hover's side, sparking against metal. The mercenaries ducked. One fired back, but the shot flew wide. Tom rolled down the hill and moved to another rock. He fired again, hitting the engine plate. The hover slowed. The marks shouted and jumped off the hover. 2 of them ran forward, blasters in hand. The leader stayed back, shouting orders. Tom stayed calm. He aimed carefully and fired at the ground near their feet. Sen exploded, forcing them to stop. "You can't hide forever," one of them yelled. Tom answered with silence. He circled around the rocks, using the high ground. When he reached the side of the hover, he threw a smoke bomb. Gray clouds covered the area. The mercenaries panicked in the chaos. Tom jumped onto the hover and pulled out the fuel rods. The engine shut down. Sparks flew. The machine stopped moving. The bald leader turned and fired wildly. Tom ducked and dropped behind a rock. One shot hit the stone, sending chips flying. Then Tom heard something strange, a loud, deep hum. He looked up and saw the alien it had stood up. Its eyes were glowing again. The blue light was stronger now, shining across its chest and arms. The blaster Tom had given it was held tight. The mercenaries stared in shock. The alien raised its hand. A soft blue beam shot from the weapon. It hit the ground in front of the men, cutting a deep line in the sand. The marks dropped their guns. The bald leader raised his hand slowly. "Wait, we didn't mean harm. We were just following orders." The alien stepped forward, steady now. Tom walked to its side. "No more dragging," Tom said. "No more running." The alien turned its head toward him. Then it looked at the mercenaries. Without a word, it reached out and pressed a button on its wrist. A small signal flashed. Tom didn't know what it meant, but far above, in the sky, something moved. A light blinked among the clouds, then another, then more. Ships. Small and silent. They dropped toward the desert like shadows. The mercenaries ran. One tripped and fell. The others vanished behind the rocks. The ships landed without sound. Their doors opened. Tall figures stepped out, wearing armor that shimmered like stone. One of them walked to the alien. They touched hands. Tom stood back. The desert stood quiet once more. The wind had stopped. Dust floated in the air, soft like smoke. The strange ships rested on the sand, their surfaces smooth and shining under the sun. No noise came from them, but their presence was strong. Tom stood beside the alien, still gripping his rifle. His breath was steady. He didn't know who these new rivals were, but he had a feeling the alien was safe now. These people were its own kind. One of the tall armored beings walked forward. Its body glowed faintly under the sun. It carried no weapon. Its face was covered by a smooth helmet with a single blue line across it. When it reached the alien, it raised its hand and pressed it gently to the alien's chest. The injured alien raised its own hand and repeated the gesture. Then the newcomer turned to Tom. Tom raised his rifle halfway, just in case, but didn't aim it. The figure held out a small silver disc. It hovered in the air, then floated toward Tom and stopped just before him. Tom didn't touch it. The alien beside him nodded once, slow and firm. Tom understood. He reached out and took the disc. At once, a warm light passed through his fingers. He felt something move in his mind, not like words, but like meaning. A voice without sound. "You are known. You acted with honor. You protected the fallen." Tom said nothing. He didn't know how to respond to that. The disc stayed quiet now, its light fading, but he kept it in his hand. The alien placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. Its grip was firm but gentle. Then it turned to the ship and walked forward. Its steps were slow, but steady. 2 others joined and helped it inside. The other armored figures remained still, waiting. Tom looked around. The mercenaries had run far. Only the bald leader stayed behind, sitting in the sand with hands tied. His face was pale, sweat dripping from his head. "You don't know what you're doing," he said to Tom. That thing's dangerous. They're all dangerous. Tom walked toward him. The man leaned back, eyes wide. Tom stopped in front of him and spoke in a calm voice. You dragged a living being across 40 miles of desert. You kicked it, starved it, tried to sell it. The man spat. In the sand. It's not human. Tom looked into his eyes. No, it isn't, but I am. Then he turned away. Behind him, one of the armored aliens stepped forward. It looked down at the mercenary, then back at Tom. Tom nodded. They would take care of him. The engines of the ships began to hum. Low and deep, sand lifted into the air. Tom stepped back as the ships rose slowly, silent and smooth. The alien who had nearly died now stood at the window, watching Tom from above. Tom raised his hand. The alien placed its hand on the glass. Then the ships rose higher and vanished into the clouds. Silence returned. Tom stood alone once again in the wide desert. The hover lay broken nearby. The mercenaries were gone. Only wind and sand remained. He looked down at the silver disc in his hand. It was smooth and cool now. No light came from it. He placed it in his pocket and turned toward the horizon. He had no ride, no map, but he had his legs and his will, and that was enough. Tom began walking. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. The wind picked up again. The sand shifted, covering tracks, erasing signs of the fight. The desert swallowed everything slowly, but something had changed. The story had begun to spread. In the small towns along the trade routes, people whispered of a man who stood alone against a group of armed mercenaries. A man who stopped the hover with nothing but courage and old tools. A man who protected a strange alien when no one else would. Some said the alien had spoken to him with its mind. Others claimed the alien offered him a place among their people, a seat in the sky. But Tom had refused. They said he only nodded, then walked into the desert like he came from it. No one knew his full name. They only called him the Desert Man. Children played games pretending to be him. Merchants told stories of him to draw crowds. Soldiers listened quietly and wondered if the tales were true and far away. In the deep parts of the galaxy, the alien's people remembered too. They marked his name in their records, not as a warrior, not as a leader, but as something they respected more. A protector. He didn't move. He didn't speak. The alien turned to him one last time and nodded. Then it pointed to the sky. Weeks passed after the strange ships vanished into the sky. The desert of Regos 9 returned to its usual silence, but something was different now. The stories of Tom and the alien spread quietly in small towns and trading posts. People whispered of the man who had faced danger alone and freed a wounded stranger. Tom had not stopped moving. He traveled slowly through the desert, carrying little but the silver disc the alien's people had given him. It was a strange device, glowing softly when he held it. But Tom did not know what it could do. Still, he kept it close as a reminder of what had happened. One evening, after a long day walking beneath the burning sun, Tom found a shallow cave among the dunes. He decided to rest there. The cave was cool and quiet, offering shelter from the wind and the stars above. As he sat down, he pulled out some dried food from his pack and ate slowly. Suddenly, a soft light appeared from the silver disc in his pocket. Tom reached in and took it out. The disc glowed brighter, sending blue waves of light across the walls of the cave. At the same time, the device projected images into the air, strange symbols and shapes moving in circles. Tom watched with curiosity. He could not understand the language, but it was clear the device was sending a message. Maybe it was a call for help or thank you. Maybe it was a guide. Before he could think more, he heard a soft sound near the entrance of the cave. Tom raised his head and looked toward the light. A figure stood there, tall and covered in shimmering armor, with glowing blue lines on its face. It was one of the alien visitors from before. Tom, the figure said, voice calm and clear despite the distance. Tom did not speak at first. He only nodded slowly. You helped one of us, the alien said. You showed kindness when others saw only a prize. We are grateful. The alien stepped forward and placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. The touch was warm and comforting. "We offer you a place with us," the alien continued, "to learn, to travel, to protect. Your strength is more than weapons." Tom looked away, thinking he had never belonged anywhere. The desert was his home, but he was a man without roots. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "Because you chose to stand when others walked away," the alien answered. "Because you are brave. Because your heart is open." Tom stayed silent. He thought of the mercenaries, the pain he had seen. He thought of the alien he had saved, and the ships that came for it. This was bigger than him, but it was also a chance. The alien smiled gently. "Come with us. You will not be alone." For a moment, Tom hesitated. Then he nodded. The alien reached into a pouch and gave Tom a small, glowing stone. "This will guide you back to us. When you are ready." Tom placed the stone in his pocket and stood. They walked out of the cave together, into the warm light of the setting sun. The desert stretched before them, wide and endless. But Tom was not afraid anymore. He had found a new path. Years passed, and the desert wind carried many stories. Some were true, some were only whispers. But one story grew stronger than all others: the story of Tom, the man who stood against cruelty and walked into the endless sands with nothing but courage. The small towns on Regos 9 remembered him. Miners told their children about the desert man who faced down armed mercenaries and freed a wounded alien from a cruel fate. Traders spoke of the silver disc he carried, a gift from strange visitors from the stars. Tom was never seen again in the towns. Some said he had joined the alien people and traveled beyond the stars. Others believed he still walked the desert alone, watching over those who could not protect themselves. One night, under the vast sky filled with stars, a group of travelers sat around a fire. They spoke quietly, passing stories as if passing a torch. "I saw footprints once," said an old man, "deep in the sand. No man could leave tracks like that. They say the desert man walks with the wind." A woman smiled and nodded. "He saved an alien once. The alien's people came and took him away. But sometimes I think he comes back, far away." In the cold silence of space, the alien Tom had saved remembered him among their records. His name was written with respect, not as a soldier, not as a hero, but as a protector, a man who chose to stand for life even when no one else would. Tom's story was not about war or glory. It was about the quiet courage that lives inside each person. The courage to choose kindness, to face fear, and to act when it matters most. And in the desert, beneath the blazing sun and the endless stars, that courage lived on.